All right, hello everybody. It's gotten cold here. We had a cold front come through, and that's kind of unfortunate. Um, Summer is about done, y'all. It's almost Halloween. Um, Today what we want to do for underground philosophy is to go back through the ethics of ambiguity and sort of break down the high points as far as what we learned by reading it. Um, this lecture will be one that you could probably watch before or after the other videos that are going to be in the Simone de Beauvoir Ethics of Ambiguity playlist on YouTube, which I've just gotten going. So kudos to me for that, right? These videos will all be easy to find and watch in order. Hopefully, by the end of that little effort there. And this is the last one, so I'm a little sad to be moving on from this text, perhaps to another one soon. I actually really enjoyed doing the stream here, and this was I don't know. It was kind of unexpected. A few people dropped in from time to time in Twitch, and you'll notice me looking over at the other screen to see if anybody's saying anything in chat or not yet, because that has happened, which is fantastic. I'm so glad to be on Twitch and also to be experimenting with video and getting into YouTube. I don't think that I could have written this. Yeah, I mean this little presentation style has been a lot closer to being back in the actual college classroom. I mean, it's more exhausting in a lot of ways because I don't really have feedback from the audience as to whether something makes sense or not, and I have to kind of wing it to an extent that I didn't have to back in those days. But I will say that I love being able to do this from the comfort of my living room and just kind of whenever I want. So don't expect me to be putting a schedule up in Twitch or anything. I might try at some point, but you're probably not going to be getting the first little bit of whatever the series is, because who knows when I'll do this again. Hopefully it'll be soon, but honestly, I'm not gonna make any promises because I'm not sure exactly what the future holds in store, so to speak here. Um, and that's okay. I'm enjoying this, and honestly, I think it's really cool to kind of be able to go back through and even watch some of these myself. Great entertainment, man. I mean, uh, but okay. So with the ethics of ambiguity, we got to see a rare thing in ethics. Generally speaking, ethics books tend to be dry. They tend to have too many examples. They tend to be things that it takes a little bit of effort to apply to your life. And I believe what de Beauvoir has accomplished in Ethics of Ambiguity is to pretty much invert that entire, so to speak, model of ethics and make it where the content is engaging and it's just easy to apply back home where it matters. And so, I mean, really, I don't see why we're not leading with this as a discipline. I mean, come on, philosophers. Raise your coffee cups with me, and let's toast to de Beauvoir here. I mean, really, really impressive book. If there's one thing I regret from my philosophical career, it's that I wasn't exposed to this sooner. I have 2 degrees in philosophy. I've taken probably 2 dozen or more, reading intensive philosophy classes that probably involved at least 3 books each over the past. God, it's been over 15 years now since I started studying this stuff. That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, how does the time go by so quickly? Man. But okay. Not to age myself any further, I think what Beauvoir has to say in this laudable text um, is essentially that what ethics does is this right here. I wrote this in red, so it would be the first thing that I said. when I started to speak to the camera here. In ethics, figure out how to be free. I mean, that's probably the best way of summing up what Beauvoir has done in this text, right? She has taken this arcane discipline and investigated all of its principles, and looked into the conflicts that exist in it. And from this analysis, I would say fairly rigorously, has produced this concept, which incorporates all of the above and manages to simplify and clarify that to a substantial degree, which, I mean, it's phenomenal. Excuse me. I've read books that were written 50 years after this book that, I mean, the authors don't really appear to have taken her into account to the extent that I think they should have. But also, I mean, this is something that, as a former ethics teacher, I regret about the education that led me to that, and I regret that about the education that I provided to other people, because I just didn't know that this was a thing, much less such an amazing thing. So, all right, enough just sort of I don't know, fandom, right? We want to talk about the issues here, and I do want to start out with something that's a little bit kind of I don't want to say negative, but just annoying here, which is that this question of what is evil seems to have kind of boiled down into something very vague, and that's not all that satisfying to me. I really would prefer if, as she has done for the concept of ethics, which is a far more difficult concept, Beauvoir had just taken a minute to kind of distill out some of the core elements of what makes something evil. But enough about that. I think that she does more or less give us the impression that evil is going to be something that equates to oppression, which is going to directly tie back into that main concept that we do like so much, which is that freedom is at the center of what ethics is. So if we're looking at evil, I would say that evil is something that people take as an end to their action, and which causes them to exercise their free action in such a way as to impede the freedom of someone else. And so this is something that ties back in fairly closely to the John Stuart Mill sort of line of reasoning in what was On Liberty. And so there's this primacy that's assigned to freedom, and one very interesting conflict that arises as a direct result of this is this sort of conflict between what we think of today as sort of a right wing, like kind of loony ideology, which is known as libertarianism, and this ethics of freedom, which is very much more of a thing of the radical left. So maybe the political continuum isn't as incongruous as we've been led to believe, right? I mean, if this is something that manages to bridge the left wing of politics with the right wing of politics, perhaps there's hope that we'll develop a system that incorporates the interests of both parties at some point. I will say that I think the right wing needs to give up a lot. I mean, I think there are going to be concessions there in most of the outcomes that I can kind of foresee here. And that's not necessarily bad. Wage inequality is horrifying, and so on and so forth. But let's not worry too much about the political end of things here, and let's not get sucked off on that tangent, because we've got a couple of other points here that are also really important. So on the critique side, and again, just because I gave kind of such a glowing review of the book, I want to kind of balance that out to some extent by showing the critical thinking that I've done as well, before we get on to the more direct reads and speculations that I think are super important to sort of pull out of this book. To will freedom for all is a concept that comes from Immanuel Kant. His idea was that there was this categorical imperative that was sort of exercised by anyone who was in fact rational. And essentially, to be rational for Kant is very much like to be moral for Kant, if they're not exactly the same thing, which I believe they are. So at the end of the day, his answer to the question of what does moral action consist in boils down to something like it's all action that is intelligible in some sense. And I believe we will be doing some Kant very shortly here, just to kind of continue the momentum. I'm really having a lot of fun sort of doing this. But so the big tension between Kant and Beauvoir is that Beauvoir doesn't really see this this imperative to create actions that make sense as being quite as primary as Kant does. In fact, what she does is she kind of kicks down the intelligibility of action a rung. So you've got essentially the need to exercise freedom, which is more or less primary. And then related to that, you've also got sort of this disclosure of the world, and that is sort of what's universal for Beauvoir, right? So when we look at moral action, what separates it from immoral action is that the people who are acting are doing so in the way that makes them the most free and maximizes the disclosure of the world, which I believe bounces back to sort of this more or less open question, I believe, after having read the book a few times. How do we know that we need to be able to, or that we need to will freedom for all, as opposed to simply for ourselves to act morally? And so you end up in a situation where there is sort of this conflict and there is this tension that arises as you read the book, because these issues aren't dealt with in the explicit way that we prefer as analytic philosophers for people to make these sorts of disclosures to us. But that having been said, it does seem that the puzzle resolves rather nicely for us when we take into account the fact that the disclosure of the world is something that we do to make our fellow human beings more free, because we provide information that they can then model things off of, and what that allows them to then do is exercise their freedom more precisely, and they have more control over it. So in acting such that we maximize our own freedom, we do create our own understanding, but we also create this disclosure of the world, which then essentially consists of the will to freedom for people who are not us. In fact, for all people. And so from this, Beauvoir wants to sort of imply, because right, she doesn't really explicitly argue this at any point, all the other principles that are typically familiar to us from our study of moral philosophy, like don't be dishonest, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill someone. These are all things that are readily, easily derived from sort of the central principle that she's got for us here, which is, figure out how best to be free. And so in this taxonomy, we run across the adventurous man, the serious man, the sub-man. Oh, hey, Matthew with 1T. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see you again. That's fantastic. Thank you. But so the thing is that once you are in a situation where, oh man, I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, you've got the serious man, the sub-man, the adventurous man, the passionate man. And these are all sort of undefined as well, right? We don't stipulate a definition for Beauvoir here, which is a little bit disorienting, again, from that sort of analytical standpoint that we are approaching this text from, right? We want to be analytical about it. We want to come up with the closest thing that we can come up with. in terms of sort of an exact meaning of some of these terms. And let me just switch over. I've got a little section in mind here when I say this. And it's just this section right here. She says, the serious man's dishonesty, this is from section 1, by the way, issues from his being obliged, the serious man's dishonesty issues from his being obliged ceaselessly to renew the denial of this freedom. He chooses to live in an infantile world, but to the child, the values are really given. The serious man must mask the movement by which he gives them to himself, like the mythomaniac who, while reading a love letter, pretends to forget she has sent it to herself. And so essentially what we're looking at here is this evil that the serious man perpetrates, right? I don't believe that's a stretch in terms of our answer to the question of what evil is, which I believe is somewhat primary for Beauvoir's philosophy here. When we look at the serious man and the way that he dictates the course of his own action, we see a dishonest movement. We see a sleight of hand which takes place. And the unfortunate consequence of this sleight of hand is that for the serious man, agency is eliminated. That's a thing that causes all kinds of problems for a lot of people. And honestly speaking, it's not hard to imagine someone saying, wow, I can't believe this happened, but I shouldn't go to jail for having done it because I didn't mean to. And so what the criminal in this case is doing is abdicating his moral responsibility for his own actions. We see this continually. We see it with politicians who, I think there was that guy who had a mistress in another country and was flying to see her all the time, and there were text messages, and his family back home obviously wasn't happy to find out about this. And and these people, what they want to do is they want to sort of control other people, right? The reason you lie to your wife about the affair that you're having is because you don't want her to you're afraid of the consequences if she finds out, right? You don't want to end up in the situation where she has this information and can freely act upon it because you're terrified of what she might do to you. I mean, in the very least, she's probably going to leave, and that's something that generally, if you're married to somebody, the goal that you have is to try to keep that from happening. So it's this thing that's really unfortunate for you because you've acted in this immoral way, and so you don't want the understanding of someone else to fully function with all of the information about the things that are going on, because you're worried about the consequences of that. And so what you're doing is you're making the world less intelligible directly for that person in an overt, explicit, and deliberate attempt to limit that person's freedom. Yeah, that's going to be immoral, right? I mean, if you come up with an ethics in which that's an acceptable behavior, you've done something very, very wrong. All of the assumptions that we have seem to lead directly to this understanding, which I think is good for what Beauvoir is attempting here, because at the end of the day, ethics is a science. I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm going to say you have to be able to validate your results experimentally in some sense, even if the experiments are thought experiments, even if you're just asking people about things, even if you're just analyzing what happens in the world. I just noticed in the chat, Matthew said she should be more understanding. Oh man, I mean, maybe so. I mean, maybe people, maybe one thing to do is to just have sort of open relationships and allow people to have like this sexual experimentation without getting all weird about it. But at the end of the day, I think that what's different about that relationship isn't so much. It's not the same issue, right? Because if you're in an open relationship and there is that level of understanding, then you can honestly communicate about the affair, and it's you know what I mean. It's no big deal. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've never successfully pulled that off, but I could see that being I don't know, just a little bit different. mm, fantastic. But okay, so when we look at the serious man, what we look at is sort of someone who has this desire for the control of the situation, so that there can be this perfect result, which generally comes straight out of the head of whoever our serious person is, right? The problem from like a cultural level that sort of drives us away from this seriousness as sort of an approach to life is that these serious people don't work well with others. They need to be able to control the situation. They need to be able to sort of deal with all the variables beforehand, and then they try to solve their problems. And so it's bad for a culture to let somebody like this be in charge, because what ends up happening is that synergy between different individuals is just destroyed, right? So liberty as a principle is indisputable, right? Because it serves this primary end of facilitating human interactions wherein the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts, which is really what happens when ethics works and works well. So there's a whole goal here, and really what we're doing when we read this book by Beauvoir or any other book by a different ethicist is we're trying to understand what makes sort of this cultural interaction possible at an individual level. Like how should we structure our lives such that we're able to avoid, say, becoming too serious, or avoid maybe being friends with a type of person who is themselves serious and treats us as maybe as a means instead of as an end. To throw back another one to Kant, and at the end of the day, the big question for anyone who wants to study moral philosophy, or who just wants to live a better, happier life, right? I mean, because getting along better with other people makes us happier. There are many studies that show that happy and healthy relationships lead to like a longer life, for example, and so we need it. I mean, this isn't something that's optional for us. This is a foundational component of our humanity. And by investigating these things in the way that Beauvoir wants to teach us to do, right? Because that's what she's doing. She's changing us with this book. It's a tool that allows her to teach us to approach a certain subset of the world in a certain way. We're able to evaluate that earnestly by reading the book and kind of critically evaluating it. And then if it passes muster, there are a set of principles that are there, which we can then pick up and kind of run with. And that's pretty incredible. There was a point, I think it was at the end of section 3B, the video that I did, that was the very last one before this one, where I felt like a salesman. I went back through and watched the video just to kind of self-critique and decide what was good and bad about it and so on, to try to get better moving forward, because that's the whole thing we're talking about here. But the thing is that when I looked at it, there was this moment where I felt like I must be trying to indoctrinate people into some kind of cult or something. It was weird. It was just such a strong appeal to people to try to be more moral. And being moral isn't really a cult thing, you know. It kind of goes wherever you go. I mean, maybe the cult is like all of humanity. So that was a puzzling moment that happened. Um, and I brought it up because I felt like I was doing it again, and I really don't want to. I mean, this is all, of course, up to you, dear viewer, whoever you are. I'm just sort of providing the information about the way the world is. So take it or leave it. I don't know. Maybe that is the type of thing that it would be appropriate to be a little bit salesy about, and evangelize. I mean, honestly, I think the world would be a better place if more people were more moral. Um, I mean, be good to each other, right? Like, what's wrong with saying that? What's wrong with being convincing when you say that? Even I don't know, but it just I have this kind of I used to be a salesman, and I found that it was something that wasn't good whenever I would have like a real pitchy moment, because I felt like people didn't like it, So I wanted to not do that because my goal was to make the customer happy, and that was, at the end of the day, it was by not being a salesman that I became a better salesman, and so anytime I feel salesman-y, that old spidey sense kind of kicks in, and I'm like, whoa, better not do that. But anyway, I don't know. I'm kind of still mulling through this, and I'm not ready to write like the essay that I want to write about this because I feel like there's just so much to it that it's really, I don't know. I read Being in Time for the first time when I was in undergrad, and I felt like it took, I want to say like 5 years to really understand what that book meant. Um, and I feel the same way about Ethics of Ambiguity. I um I was thinking about what I wanted to say today last night when I was like in the shower, and one of my shower thoughts was, Aristotle 2.0. And I had like this whole thing where I sort of constructed like this version list, and it was like Aristotle like 1.1 was like maybe like Marcus Aurelius or somebody, and like maybe 1.2 was Epicurus, and then we had 1.5, which was Thomas Aquinas, and maybe like 1.7, which was Kant. And so like the features start to emerge of the modern ethics, as ironically society evolves alongside the philosophy that we're doing and that we're reviewing to make these claims. And so there is a sense in which a pivotal book that does something new that nobody's really done, that's written by somebody who's extraordinarily well read and willing to pretty much pick up the truth wherever it's found, and sort of somebody with the mental horsepower to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the various different philosophers that she studied, and then sort of distill from those various different things, sort of the components of a system that actually really works well and does something that the old system couldn't accomplish. And yeah, I mean, the simplicity of this, the fact that there are just not really any, there are a handful of principles, but there's not like a long list of facts that need to be memorized for an understanding of this work to take place. I do think it's a hard read, which is why I picked it to do the proof of concept of this underground philosophy thing. That the idea is basically that it's like an open source, decentralized philosophy class. So if you're reading this or listening to this, yeah, I don't know how you would read it. Okay, but if you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, what a cool idea. I have a philosopher I know really well, and I want to do like a reading like that. Then, feel free to take the underground philosophy name and just attach it if you want to. Anybody can be part of this. I think the concept is going to be that this deep reading that we're trying to do, where we we go through the text and we evaluate it, but we also sort of loudly go through the various different thoughts that occur to us as we go, and we also sort of take the highlights. So we're reading a shorter book, right? Because we're skipping a bunch of stuff. But this skimming sort of it's something that comes to you as you get deeper into books like this and get to where you've read some of them 20 or 30 times and really have spent time in the text, because there are certain points where the text really does something important, and then there are other points where maybe what the text is doing is a little bit less central to what you conceive of as the main narrative that's going on there. And that's okay. That's what we want. Is that sort of practiced type of read through a text, because the more we do it, the better we get at it, and the better we get at it, the more we notice things like evil for Beauvoir, which I will frankly just confess to missing until I got the book up on the screen and started reading it. And then that thought popped up. It hadn't popped up in any of the readings that preceded. And so it's one of those things. I mean, I have a master's degree in this stuff. I've been doing it for years. I've done my own books. There are people that are far better at it than I am. But at the same time, I can still see my own skills starting to develop as I pick up things that I wouldn't have picked up in the past, and really I can also look back to a time when maybe I wasn't very good at this, and I can think, wow, I totally missed the point of that book, and I think that insofar as I have a future as a philosopher, one of the things that I'm going to have to say to some of the other philosophers is, cite your source, please. Like I went and read that book 14 times, and I don't see what you're talking about. So let's have that conversation, and I think that would be a very moral thing of me to do. Help boost up the understanding and the disclosure of the world by kind of being nitpicky and analytical. Oh man. But yeah, I mean, overall, I would say that this has been a blast, and I think it's, again, just an amazing text. I'm going to put a YouTube playlist together so that all the videos are in the same spot, and you can kind of get from one to the next if you want to, a little bit more easily that way. And then I am planning to do another Twitch stream soon, but I'm not going to commit as far as actually when that'll take place, because I need to go back through and read at least one more book that I've read before, but I need to get back through there and kind of be familiar and make sure that whatever it is happens to be available online. So I'm looking at Kant, I'm looking at Karl Popper's The Open Society and Its Enemies. Given the political moment that we're still kind of in, maybe that would be the way to go. Okay, so Matthew is asking if it might be a few weeks to the next stream. I'm thinking more like a few days. Probably I would start up again maybe Friday, do Friday, Saturday, Sunday again. Something like that. I really like streaming. I'm not saying I'm not gonna, not gonna do it for a couple weeks. It's just I don't know exactly when I'll be ready, because I have to figure out which book and make sure it's available in the right format and some things like that, and then actually go through and do all the highlights. Yeah, and honestly, what I'm hoping is that the next time I do this type of an exercise, it'll be a little bit more seamless. I want to try to work on the uhs and ums and get the lighting figured out to some extent, and I don't know. I've got a lot to learn. This is totally new to me, so I think it's really cool though that the Twitch thing is working. I think that's incredible. It really does just. It kind of puts a smile on my face to know that people are watching this right now, which I don't know. It's just flattering, and I really enjoy that. Hey, thank you. Matthew says I'm doing a better job than he could with the streaming, but practice makes perfect, I guess. in any case, yeah, I think that's about it. So more coming soon. YouTube channel for this. There'll be YouTube tags for all the ones that are done in the future, and whoever you are, whenever you're watching this, I hope you really enjoy it, and I hope it helps you make better choices in life. And I mean, yeah, it still feels kind of ridiculous to say, but that's the point of ethics. So yeah, I mean that shouldn't feel weird. In any case, more soon. Until then.